The barn smelled of hay and damp wood, but to a little girl sitting on the rough floor, it felt more like a prison than a home. Her small hands trembled as she pushed away the wooden bowl filled with thin, watery soup that tasted more of bitterness than of food. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. She was only 7, but hunger, loneliness, and cruelty had already aged her spirit. "I can't eat this anymore," she murmured through sobs, her voice breaking under the weight of exhaustion and despair. The woman in the red dress towering over her snapped, her voice sharp and cold, echoing against the wooden beams. The child flinched as if struck by the words alone, her fragile body curling inward as she tried to hold herself together. And then, like a sudden strike of lightning, the heavy barn doors creaked open. Light spilled in, revealing a tall man in a gray suit. His shoes were polished, his briefcase hanging at his side, but his face was one of shock, disbelief, and an anger he could no longer contain. "Stop," his voice thundered, filling the barn and freezing the scene in place. That single word changed everything. Sparkles, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love to heal broken hearts, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Glow. Your support helps us spread more heart-touching stories like this one. Sparkles. The little girl didn't know it yet, but the man who had just walked in wasn't just anyone. He was a millionaire, a man who had built his fortune with grit, resilience, and an understanding of what suffering truly meant. And when his eyes landed on the shivering child, something deep inside him shifted. He wasn't just a stranger who had stumbled upon this cruelty. He was about to become the turning point of her entire life. But to understand the weight of this moment, we need to go back. To the days before the barn, before the tears, before the hunger. To the beginning of the girl's struggle. Her name was Emily. She once had a life that, while simple, was filled with warmth. Her mother, Anna, was a gentle woman with a soft voice and eyes that always smiled. Emily's father had passed away when she was very young, leaving Anna to raise her alone. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that love was enough. Their small home echoed with laughter and bedtime stories, the kind that made Emily believe the world was safe and kind. But life has a way of unraveling even the most beautiful of dreams. Anna fell ill one winter. At first, it was just a cough. Then it became harder for her to get out of bed, harder for her to smile. Emily, too young to understand the shadows forming in her mother's eyes, would bring her cups of warm water and sing lullabies back to her, just as Anna had always done for her. But no song could heal the illness that spread through Anna's body. One fateful night, as snow fell quietly outside their little window, Anna's breathing slowed, and then it stopped. Emily's world shattered in that moment. She was taken in by her stepmother, a woman named Clara. On the surface, Clara looked elegant, with striking beauty and clothes that spoke of wealth. But beneath the polished exterior was a heart hardened by bitterness. To Clara, Emily was not a child to be loved but a burden to be tolerated. The meals became smaller, the chores heavier, and the love non-existent. Clara made sure Emily knew her place, low, unwanted, forgotten. Day after day, Emily worked in silence. Her small hands grew rough from scrubbing floors, her little body weak from the lack of food. She wore the same old dress until it was more patch than fabric. When she cried, Clara scolded her. When she hoped, Clara mocked her. And when she begged for kindness, Clara turned away. The barn became Emily's refuge and her prison. It was where she was sent when Clara didn't want to see her. The hay became her bed, the draft her blanket. The food she received was barely edible, often scraps that even animals would have turned away. But Emily endured, because she had no choice. And yet, even in her suffering, she clung to the faintest flicker of hope. Somewhere deep inside her heart, she believed that someone, someday, would see her. That someone would hear her cries. That day came sooner than she expected. On the afternoon when Clara once again forced her into the barn with a bowl of thin soup, Emily's body had reached its limit. She could no longer force herself to swallow. Her stomach twisted with hunger, yet the taste of the bitter liquid made her gag. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I can't eat this anymore." It was in that raw moment of vulnerability that fate intervened. The barn door swung open, and a man's shadow filled the room. He had come, not by accident, but following a trail of whispers in the village. People had spoken of a little girl treated with cruelty, of a woman who hid behind wealth and beauty while breaking a child's spirit. The men had listened, and something inside him had compelled him to see for himself. His name was Michael Harrington. A millionaire who had risen from nothing, who had once known the gnawing pain of hunger himself. To the world, he was powerful and respected, but in that moment, as he saw the small child crying on the barn floor, he was not a businessman. He was a man reliving his own scars. "Stop," he thundered, his voice cracking like a whip through the air. Clara spun around, startled, her face flushing with a mixture of anger and fear. Emily froze, her tears still glistening on her cheeks, her small frame trembling. Michael's eyes locked onto Clara, then softened as they fell upon Emily. Something inside him shifted permanently. He couldn't walk away. He couldn't let this child suffer the way he once had. And so began a story that would change all three of their lives forever. The barn fell silent after Michael's thunderous command. Clara's sharp tongue, usually so quick to strike, seemed to falter as her eyes met his. She recognized him instantly. Michael Harrington was not just a wealthy man, he was a figure of influence, someone whose presence could silence entire boardrooms. What was he doing here, standing in her barn, glaring at her with such fury? Emily's tiny body curled tighter against the wooden floor, as if she feared the storm that might erupt between the two adults. Her heart pounded in her chest, uncertain whether this stranger's presence meant salvation or more pain. Michael dropped his briefcase onto the ground with a heavy thud and strode forward, his eyes never leaving Clara. He had once been a boy who starved on the streets, begging for scraps, surviving on the rare kindness of strangers. To see a child suffering the same fate, while someone so capable of giving love and comfort withheld it, was unbearable to him. His voice, low and steady now, carried a weight that could not be ignored. "How long has this child been living like this?" he demanded. Clara's lips tightened, her elegance suddenly cracking under the pressure. She forced a cold smile, trying to maintain control. "You misunderstand," she said smoothly, though her voice trembled slightly. "She's a difficult child. She refuses to eat, refuses to behave. I've done everything I can. If she chooses to be ungrateful, that's not my fault." Michael's gaze hardened. He looked at the bowl of watery soup, at the pile of carrots and spinach on the floor, at Emily's tear-stained face and trembling hands. A wave of memory swept through him, memories of his own mother crying as she tried to stretch a loaf of bread for days, of the hollow ache in his stomach as he fell asleep on cold nights. He crouched down, lowering himself to Emily's level. She flinched at first, and used to gentleness, but he did not reach for her immediately. Instead, he simply looked at her, his eyes softening. "You don't have to eat it if it hurts you," he said quietly, his voice carrying warmth she hadn't felt in so long. Emily's eyes widened, tears spilling faster. No one had ever told her that before. No one had given her the choice. For so long, she had been forced, scolded, and silenced. Now, a man she had never seen before had spoken words that felt like freedom. Clara, seeing the control slipping from her hands, snapped back into her usual venom. "This is nonsense. She's weak and spoiled, and you have no idea the trouble she's caused me. Do you think you can just walk in here and tell me how to raise her?" Michael rose to his full height again, towering over Clara, his voice firm and cutting. "This isn't raising a child. This is breaking one." Those words struck like lightning, and for the first time, Clara had no retort. Michael turned back to Emily, kneeling once more. Slowly, carefully, he extended his hand. "You don't have to stay here anymore. You're safe now." Emily looked at his hand, hesitant, fear and hope warring inside her fragile heart. She had learned not to trust easily, not to believe promises, because promises often turned into lies. Yet something in his voice, something in his eyes, told her he meant every word. With trembling fingers, she placed her small hand into his. Michael felt the weight of that moment. Her hand was so light, so fragile, but the trust it carried was heavier than gold. He gently helped her to her feet, holding her protectively against his side. Clara's voice rose again, shrill and desperate. "You can't take her. She's mine to care for, and what will people think if—" But Michael cut her off with a look so cold it silenced her mid-sentence. "You lost the right to call this care the moment you let her starve." Emily clung to Michael's sleeve, her tears soaking the fabric of his suit. For the first time in so long, she felt something that almost resembled safety. Michael walked her out of the barn, the sunlight streaming over them as if to mark the beginning of a new chapter. Yet, as he led her toward his car, Emily's small voice whispered a question that nearly broke him. "Will you send me back?" The innocence of the question cut through his chest like a knife. She had known nothing but rejection, nothing but abandonment, and now she was bracing for the same fate once again. Michael crouched down, looking her straight in the eyes. His voice was firm, unwavering, and filled with conviction. "Never." Those words, simple and absolute, sank into Emily's heart like a promise she had always longed for. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she dared to believe it might be different. Michael opened the car door, helping her inside. As he drove away, leaving Clara's barn behind, Emily gazed out the window. Her reflection showed a tear-stained face, but in her eyes, a faint spark of hope flickered where there had once only been despair. Michael glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his heart heavy yet determined. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. A child so broken could not be healed overnight. Trust would take time, love would take patience, and scars, both seen and unseen, would linger. But he was ready. For her, he was ready. Because sometimes, the greatest fortune a person could ever have was not money or success, but the chance to save a life. And so, their journey together began. The ride to Michael's home was quiet at first. Emily sat curled against the window, her small fingers gripping the seatbelt as though at any moment she might be told to get out and return to the life she had just left behind. Every bump in the road made her flinch, every passing tree a blur of uncertainty. But Michael did not rush her. He simply drove steadily, glancing at her every now and then with a reassuring smile that spoke of patience, not pressure. When they arrived at his estate, Emily's eyes widened. The mansion stood tall with gleaming windows and gardens full of color she hadn't seen in years. But wealth was not what struck her the most, it was the warmth. The staff who greeted Michael were kind, their smiles genuine, and when they saw Emily, there was no judgment, only gentle compassion. For the first time, she walked into a place that did not feel like a cage, but like the possibility of home. Michael led her to a room he had prepared, not knowing why he felt compelled to do so before. The bed was soft, the blankets clean and warm, and on the nightstand rested a small lamp shaped like a star. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed. "Is this for me?" she whispered. Michael knelt beside her, his voice steady. "Yes, Emily. All of this is for you. You deserve a safe place." That night, Emily lay in the bed, staring at the star-shaped lamp. Her body was warm, her stomach full from a meal she had been allowed to choose herself, but her mind still fought the ghosts of the past. Every creak of the house made her fear Clara's footsteps. Every kindness made her wonder if it was temporary. And yet, she clung to Michael's promise, never. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Emily began to change. At first, she spoke little, answering questions with nods or whispers. But Michael never forced her. He simply showed up, reading her bedtime stories, cooking meals with her in the kitchen, sitting beside her when nightmares woke her in the night. His consistency became her safety. One afternoon, while Michael was working in his study, Emily tiptoed in, clutching a piece of paper. She placed it on his desk without a word. When he looked down, he saw a shaky drawing of two figures holding hands, one tall, one small. Above them, she had written with uncertain letters, "Me and Daddy." Michael's throat tightened, his eyes burning. For so long, he had built businesses, earned riches, and achieved titles, but nothing compared to the simple gift of that paper. It was not just a drawing, it was trust, it was belonging, it was family. From then on, Emily's laughter began to return. She ran through the gardens, played with the staff's children, and even began attending school. Though shy at first, she discovered joy in learning and hope in friendships. The scars of her past did not vanish overnight, but they no longer defined her. As for Clara, word of Michael's intervention spread quickly through the community. Her mask of elegance shattered, and she found herself facing questions she could not silence. The world saw her for what she truly was, and in time, she was left with nothing but the emptiness she had tried to bury beneath wealth and pride. But Michael never spoke of her again. For Emily, the focus was not on the pain left behind, but on the love that lay ahead. Years later, as Emily grew, she often looked back on that day in the barn. The memory of the bitter soup, the hay on the floor, and the harsh words still lingered, but so did the sound of a door opening and a voice shouting, "Stop." It had been the moment her life changed, the moment despair gave way to hope. Michael never let her forget her worth. He reminded her daily, not with grand speeches, but with quiet actions, a hand held, a meal shared, a presence that never wavered. And Emily, in turn, blossomed into a young woman filled with compassion, determined to help others who suffered as she once had. Because sometimes, kindness is not just a word. It is a hand reaching out when the world has turned away. It is a promise kept when all others have been broken. It is the courage to stop cruelty in its tracks and replace it with love. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Glow. Every click helps us share more stories of hope and second chances with the world. Sparkles. And before we end, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Backhand index pointing right. What would you have done if you were in Michael's place? The story of Emily and Michael is not just fiction, it's a reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can save a life. And sometimes, the greatest wealth we can ever give is love.